Welcome back to the Wizards Lair podcast, where we break down every episode of Wizards of Waverly Place. This is episode 9. I'm Daphne, and I'm with my husband Xander. So today we are talking about season 1, episode 9, called Movies.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you're enjoying your summer so far. I know we are, and we've been getting back into Wizards of Waverly Place. So let's go ahead and start breaking down episode 9. I'll give like a little bit of an overview, and then we can start breaking it down. So this one is revolving around Justin and Alex, and kind of a Justin and Alex indirect mess around.
Yes.
But Justin doesn't want Alex hanging out with his friends, and so he's wanting to, kind of be a grown-up, and she's trying to butt in on the fun. And so that's kind of where the episode takes off.
Yes, Justin has made some new, kind of cooler friends, which Alex doesn't think they're going to be cool at first because they're from his advanced math class. So she's imagining, these super nerds. But then she meets them, and they're, these cool 17-year-olds. So she's, immediately wants to be friends with them, too. So, yeah, that's kind of a good overview. This is another one, which we talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is another one that does not feature Harper. I feel like we have not seen Harper in a minute, and it makes me sad.
This is at least the second one in a row.
Yeah, maybe third, honestly. I feel like it's been a minute, and I miss her.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize that she was in so few episodes in the beginning. And also, because she's not a wizard, she's not really contributing much.
Well, and because she doesn't know yet. I feel like we don't really get to see Harper's growth and her, serious involvement in the plot of each episode until she finally finds out. And I always forget every time we watch this show how long it takes for her to find out. Do you know roughly, when that happens?
Season 2, episode 10, right around there.
Season 2, so it's, well into the second season. In my head, I always equate it to, I know this is a different show, but I equate it to, Hannah Montana, where within the first 2 or 3 episodes, Miley's closest friends are finding out. So it's not really a secret from her friends for very long. Whereas in Wizards, Harper is Alex's best friend and has been, their whole childhood. And she doesn't find out for so long. And I can't wait till we get to that point because I really, really love, Harper being a more critical role and kind of becoming a member of the Russo family.
Totally, and the one cool aspect about Harper is that because she doesn't know yet, she's kind of like us, the viewer.
True.
That's one thing that we, the viewer, have in common with Harper is that we also are not wizards and,
right.
and don't know anything about magic. So that's kind of one thing that we have. But yeah, indirectly, she ends up not being involved with most things, and if she is, it's more like a side story kind of way.
Right.
So I'm sure we'll see more of Harper as the series goes on, but in the meantime, we actually do have a couple new characters / guest stars.
Yes.
And I figured we would go ahead and talk about those. So the first one is we have Tiffany Thornton, who everybody might remember as Tawny and Sunny with the Chance.
I love her on that show, and I was so excited to see her in this episode. She is so funny.
And she reprised her role in So Random, too, when the spinoff happened.
Yep.
Also, now this I kind of forgot about, but I've been also rewatching Hannah Montana.
Yeah.
And she's in 2 episodes of Hannah Montana.
Yes, isn't she maybe one of Jackson's love interests or something like that?
I think she plays, yes, her name is Becky.
Yes, I remember that. She's a very funny actress, and so I loved seeing her on this episode.
I can think of the parrot in Hannah Montana, Bucktooth Becky.
Yes.
Bodacious Becky, or whatever, the parrot's repeating things.
Yep.
And so she gets very offended by that. So Tiffany Thornton placed, what was her name? Susan in this episode. Her name is Susan.
Yes.
Yes, and she's one of Justin's, what does Justin say, academically inclined or whatever his little
Something
term was?
Like that.
Arithmetic buffs?
Yes,
that's what it was.
Instead of nerds.
Yes, and so she plays an awesome role in this one. And then we also have Dan Benson, who makes his first appearance, except it's not as Zeke Beakerman as we all know.
No, it's Zach. What's his last name?
Rosenblatt, I think it was.
Yeah.
I didn't think it actually said it, and then we watched it, and it said, Zach Rosenblatt. So I knew that his name was Zach, and then later changed to Zeke. So I'm assuming they thought that, kind of like Tiffany Thornton, she was just going to be a one-off character, and then they ended up adding or bringing back Dan as Justin's best friend and naming him Zeke. So it's kind of weird because they both kind of play the same character.
Kind of.
They're both, very smart. They're both Justin's, friend or whatever, and
they just made Zeke a little sillier. But it's interesting to me that they bothered changing his name and making him a new character.
As if we just would forget.
Because there's no reason that it couldn't be just the same guy, because Justin is clearly friends with this guy. I wonder, the only thing I can think of is in this episode, Zach and all these other friends are supposed to be older than him because he's in an advanced math class. I believe Justin is 16 and they're 17.
Good call.
So maybe the reason they changed the character is because he needs to be younger. He needs to be Justin's age so he can, be in school at the same time as him, whereas he would have graduated by then if it was still Zach. So that's the only thing I can think of as to why they would change the character. But he wasn't that different. He's just a little bit more of a subdued version of Zeke, I guess, not as goofy.
But that's a really good point, though, because I think you're absolutely right. I don't think they really intended on bringing Dan back, but once they were thinking, like, oh, how can we elevate the series, or what can we do to add more to, Justin's character? We give him a best friend.
He needed a Harper.
And then, bingo, absolutely. And then eventually Harper and Zeke get together, so...
Yep.
Spoiler alert if anybody hasn't seen the series, I don't know at this point. Anyway, so yeah, we have a couple awesome guest stars, guest appearances, and in terms of magic, we are introduced to the topic of make-em-ups for the first time, which is
exciting.
Extremely important to the series. And so I feel like most of us Wizards fans kind of understand this, but just in case somebody doesn't, there's two types of magic that you can use in Wizards. And for a while, all we have heard about are these certified spells, which they're called that, I think, in the episode Helping Hand, is when we learn more about certified spells in particular. But we're seeing spells so far in the series that every wizard can use or has learned and can learn from books. Whereas Jerry, in this episode, is stressing the importance of magic improv, or as they call them, make-em-ups, being able to use magic in your own way on the spot, as opposed to a spell that's already been, quote-unquote certified / used widely by many wizards.
Right.
And so I love this concept because if you think about magic, with wizards, it's like the idea of magic, you can use magic to do whatever you want, as opposed to magic having certain limitations. I mean, I think the idea of magic is that it is unlimited.
Yeah.
And it can do many, many things. Now, of course, in wizards, we'll learn that, like, plastic is the natural enemy.
There's always some silly rules.
There has to be some rock, paper, scissors where something gets buffed, but obviously magic should be able to do anything.
Yeah.
And so far, we're only seeing magic being able to do certain things. And I like this idea of make-em-ups because it implies that wizards have more power than just what's in, like, a textbook. It's like they can, on their own, in the moment, use spells and magic in a way that's going to, hopefully benefit them in the world. Again, you can use magic for evil just like you can good. But assuming that what Jerry's trying to teach them is the importance of spell improv, and I love that. And we're going to see this play a huge part in the series as we go on.
Yeah, and it's cool because in this scene, immediately Alex is a natural and figures out how to do this right away, because you have to be very quick thinking, and from what we've seen, the makeups kind of have to rhyme and have to make sense and be very specific. So Alex really caught on right away, whereas it is much harder for Justin since he is more of an academic, by-the-books person who wants to memorize, certified spells and has a hard time coming up with something on the spot. So I thought that was interesting because, it's only every so often that we come across something that Alex is better at than Justin. So.
Oh, yeah, very good point.
So do you want to kind of start back at the beginning of the episode and walk through some things? Because we've kind of skipped already. When the episode first opens, we have Jerry, Teresa, Alex, and Max coming back from a movie. And they've seen some silly kids movie called Icebarks, yes, which is like snowboarding... Aardvarks?
I think it was
ice hockey.
Ice hockey.
Yes, hockey playing aardvarks. Yes. I'm assuming some animated kids movie. And Alex is kind of going through a little phase because Justin is out with his older friends and she's jealous that she's still, being treated like a baby and having to go to this kids movie with her family and everything. So that's kind of where it starts off. And then Justin comes back thinking he's so cool for having stayed out late, even though he came back exactly on time. That was hilarious.
Yeah, that kind of brings up the subplot of this episode because while Alex is, busy, I think Alex and Justin are both busy trying to grow up too fast.
Yes.
That's kind of what Teresa points out, that they're growing up too fast. Justin wants to hang out with older people to make himself feel cooler. Mm-hmm. And Alex kind of indirectly is doing the same exact thing.
Oh, yeah.
Hanging out with Justin's friends.
Yeah,
and
so just latches on.
So Teresa says, well, I better enjoy the time I have with Max while he's young.
Yes.
And, she tries to
kind of baby him and, like you said, make sure he doesn't grow up too fast, and kind of starts forcing him to do things with her and Jerry that are very little kiddish and things that he obviously does not want to do. And that's a very funny but, you know, inconsequential subplot. I love the secondary plots of these episodes.
Yeah, it's real funny when Max looks over to Alex and Justin, like, for help. He goes, help, and they both say, no. At the same time, it's like, man, you're leaving him hanging. That's
so good. They're like, we went through it, you have to too. It's a rite of passage as the youngest child.
Yeah, so Alex is wanting to hang out with Justin's friends, like we said, and so Justin is going to a rated R movie with his friends. And Alex is like, hey, you're not old enough to see that. And Justin's like, well, neither are you. And so they're kind of like having this fight over, you know, Justin not wanting Alex to hang out with his friends. Alex saying, get over it. You know, basically, we can't choose our friends. Justin's like, yes, we can. That was so funny. So anyway, yeah, they go to this, I don't even know what the movie's called. It's such a weird name. Night of the Halloween Sorority Party Disaster 2.
2, yes.
I wonder what happened in Night of the Halloween Sorority Party Disaster 1. But anyways, apparently it stars this lady, Ruby Donahue, who is a very big personality, a very big celebrity in the Wizards world. And unfortunately, she's only mentioned this one time. I think it'd be cool if we heard from Ruby Donahue several times throughout the series.
Yes, but I like the things like that continue.
Alex mentions how she makes music and she's an actress, so she seems to have both a movie career and a music career.
And that's one of the things that she actually bonds with Susan over, which was Tiffany Thornton's character.
Yes, she's trying to force her way in with that.
Yes.
I like how she bumps into her accidentally in the hallway at school. It's like, oh my gosh, she's really trying to force her way into this friends group. And so once we get to the theater, that's when Alex realizes that Justin's not trying to break into the movie. He's hanging out in the arcade while they're in the rated R movie.
Yeah, and Susan even says to Alex after she can't get in with her little homemade fake ID.
That's terrible.
That was so funny. But Susan even says to Alex that she can take notes like she does for Justin, and that like implies that they've done this many times. He just tags along to the theater and plays games while his friends are in the movie, which is kind of sad.
It seems like he's also trying to force himself, you know, kind of like Alex is. They're both doing the same thing in this episode.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't really think about it that way with Justin, but you are right. I mean, he's not old enough to do the things that his friends want to do, but he still wants. And it's almost like he's trying to impress like Alex and his family because he doesn't tell them, or he doesn't tell Alex that he's not going into the movie. In fact, earlier in the episode, he was like, you know, it's none of your business how I get into the movie, acting like he's going to. When in reality, he's just playing games by himself.
So weird. So weird. But Alex's grand plan to get into the movie is to use magic.
Right.
And she apparently didn't listen to Jerry, because Jerry, earlier in the episode, himself said, you have to be careful with magic, especially make-em-ups, because magic is very literal. So I think they used the example, what was the make-em-up spell? Satisfy my empty belly, make me a peanut butter and jelly, as opposed to making a sandwich appear next to you on a plate. It turns Max himself
into a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
And Alex, yeah, like you mentioned earlier, she, you know, quick on the draw, comes back with, although I like such tasty snacks, I'd rather have my brother Max, which is the undo spell in a way that kind of undoes it. So
I love that moment too, because afterwards she was laughing at how good she was, and she was like, that wasn't even true.
Yeah, that's terrible. Poor Max. They really crap on Max.
They really do.
Max gets the short end of the stick twice in this episode. But yeah, her big plan is to get in the movie using magic. And instead of getting her into the movie theater in the seats with everybody else, she appears on screen in the movie itself. Now, here's where the episode is going to get a little weird, because I can't even fathom this. I can't even understand this, because, you know, the movie was written, directed, produced, filmed, and released, and has been shown many times. And then all of a sudden in this movie, version of the movie, you have all this extra stuff going on.
And it's stuff that doesn't make sense.
At all.
Like, Alex is just being Alex and trying to figure out how to get out of this movie.
Yeah, she's breaking the fourth wall. Like, how am I in this movie? I'm just a kid. I shouldn't be in this movie.
Right, and she is, and that's another weird thing about it, is that she's very clearly like a 14-year-old who's
in a sorority.
Right, who's not dressed like anybody else, who doesn't know what's going on.
It's like, super weird. So you could imagine, like, having seen that movie, like, once or twice already and being like, oh my gosh, it is so good. I have to see it again. And then you go and see it, and then it's
different.
This. You're like, Like, how do you, and like even the movie itself, like again, it was being filmed. Nobody can say, "Cut! Who are you? What are you doing here?"
Right.
The movie's just happening as if she's been there the whole time, as if it's part of the script, and it's really, really odd to think about. Makes my head hurt after a little while.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we even get a really funny side conversation between these two employees of the movie place.
Yes.
Where the guy says, I've seen that movie, played that movie 17 times. And just now, there's these new characters. Is it a director's cut? Like, they're so confused.
So this is what makes me want to categorize this as a blatant exposure of magic.
Absolutely. And when we were watching it, that's what I said. I said blatant. Like,
yeah, this is like, it's undeniable.
Yeah.
So, obviously, anybody who's watching knows at this point that we're keeping track of how obvious the Russos are at exposing magic, because again, we'll find out sooner or later that the number one rule of magic is to preserve magic. Don't expose magic. Don't tell anybody about magic, especially, well, unless they're a wizard or magical creature. Don't tell non-magical creatures about magic, and it has to be a secret. And so that's like the big thing of the show. And so already in episode 9, we are up to 3, this being the 4th.
Yes.
Having Alex and Justin both appear in the movie, and they even use magic in the movie. Justin uses a spell. What was the spell? He said,
he uses 2 spells.
He said, "I've had enough of this fear, so hurry up and get us out of here." And it transports him to the basement of the sorority.
Right, they're still in the movie.
And so, again, the camera is following Justin from the top level to the bottom level, and they're clearly using magic. And then eventually, Justin says, "I'm scared of what might happen next. Take us to the Mondoplex." And then that zaps him out of the movie.
The Mondo, like that's the place that they're at. That's the name of this movie theater or the complex that they're in.
Yeah. It's way too blatant. It's way too obvious. It's crazy.
Well, and we know that people who know Alex and Justin and who just saw them before the movie saw this.
Oh, yeah. Susan calls it out.
Yeah, Susan calls it out, and yet, even though she's intellectually, or academically smart, she is kind of blonde.
Yeah.
And kind of not all there.
It's like,
and so she doesn't get it. And they're lucky that she doesn't get it and that she doesn't fully make the connection. But she specifically says, like there was a girl in that movie that looked just like Alex. And she was dressed, she had the same outfit as her. She kind of talked like her. And but luckily his friends left because they were too scared. And so they didn't actually get to the part that Justin was in. Yeah. Otherwise it would have been an even more blatant exposure.
Yeah, and the only way they try and deflect it, like you mentioned, those two guys were having a side conversation about what the heck is going on. He says, "Is this a director's cut? Like, what is this?" So, I mean, they do try and justify it, but I think that, again, it's a very, very blatant exposure of magic where you have magic being used on screen in a movie, in a theater of people, and then, like you said, Susan even calls it out. She's really freaked out about how Alex is in the movie, so it's just too obvious to get away with.
Definitely. And there was one other moment that we need to talk about because we weren't sure if it would classify as an exposure or not. But when Justin does do that final make-em-up spell and snaps them back to the Mondoplex, they just kind of appear in a puff of smoke in the middle of the lobby of this theater.
Yep. Surrounded
by people. So I would say it's an exposure. However, in the shot, it didn't really look like anyone was watching them. So I don't know. Everybody had their backs turned. I don't know if anybody saw it. So I don't know if we can classify it or not. What do you think?
Yeah, I really wanted to because it just seemed such a reckless thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand that they were in a movie and they were scared for their life because they're not in real life, but also there's like a murderer chasing after them, which, by the way, the killer is just like some little tiny dude with a plastic mask, a black robe, and a hairdryer.
I love the hairdryer.
I love it.
Like, what?
But yet you hear it the whole time.
But you can see like the plug-in part of it just hanging. How is this scary?
I love Disney Channel's version of a serial killer.
Right. It can't be actually violent.
They just put in the air dryer. Anyway.
But yeah, you were saying they appear out of nowhere, and it would be so blatant if anybody noticed.
Yeah, it was very reckless of them to just pop into the Mondoplex like that, and so I wanted to count it because it just is so obvious. But yeah, nobody seemed to really notice, and I know in the last episode, when we were talking about whether or not this was an exposure or not. I don't know if we counted it. I think we did. I know there was the exposure of magic with Franklin and Dragon.
Yes.
When Dragon flew through the air
away, yeah.
and Frankie saw the whole thing. But later in the episode, Alex turned herself into a tiger right in front of everybody. Mm-hmm. And we counted that as a magic exposure as well, didn't we?
That's true. I think we did.
And I think we counted...
Well, because I think the people saw that happen.
They saw it afterwards. They didn't see her change, but when they said, oh no, look, a tiger, then they kind of freaked out.
Okay.
But we still counted it because I guess people did kind of end up realizing there's a huge tiger
and that
in
has
this
just
dog
come
show
out of nowhere.
that came out of nowhere and shouldn't have been here because this isn't a circus, this isn't a zoo. So this one I wanted to count, but you're right, it didn't seem to affect the story in any way. It was just a means to get out. So I know this is a gray area, but I'm going to let this one slide just because I don't want to like, oh, yep, there it is, boom, and just have our counter to
Yeah,
say.
we want to be strict about these exposures, but let us know what you guys think in the comments if you disagree or if you think that this should be counted. I think it's very, very close.
I think it's very obvious the first one, though, is definitely an exposure.
Well, yeah.
Popping in the movie is
Definitely.
obvious. Popping back into the Mondoplex, if everybody had their... If even one person had their back, turned or whatever, but it didn't really seem like anybody made a big deal out of that. So, yeah, definitely we'll count the first one. That leaves us at a score of 4 now for...
That's still a lot for only 9 episodes.
It's a lot, but it's not as much as I thought. I figured we would have 1 per episode, honestly.
Well, and honestly, I think it's because we've been so strict about what we're defining as an exposure, because there have been plenty of moments in every episode that we could, but we're giving them some leeway if people don't notice.
Yeah, and I've said this in several episodes, and I'll say it again until it happens, but I can think of one episode right now where there are 2 in one episode, 2 obvious, blatant exposures of magic, and I just can't wait till we get that so we can cross it off and I can move on, but
I can't wait.
I just keep thinking about those coming up. I know it's in season 1, too, so we will get to it, but for now, we're going to stay at 4 for the magic exposure counter. But afterwards, they basically go back home, right? Is that what happens?
Yeah, Jerry and Teresa actually catch them and find them, and it's very humorous. We even get like that dramatic scary movie music when they see them, so that was really, really funny.
Yeah, I think the only thing left was the post-credit scene, or the credit scene where it's like a half-canon scene.
Yes.
And Alex is asleep on the couch, and everybody comes in dressed up as the killer from the movie with the mask, the cloak, and the hairdryer. And Teresa, Max, Justin, and Jerry all crowd around Alex with a hairdryer. And when she wakes up and freaks out, they take off their masks. They reveal the gig is up. Ha ha ha. Except there's one other person there who didn't take their mask off, who looks just like the killer from the movie, which causes everyone to run and leave and screaming. And of course, that's where the episode ends, which is funny, but it never reveals to us who that person is. But again, I don't even think that's part of the show, really.
I think it's one of those funny little, end of episode, is it canon, is it not kind of scenes.
Just one last quick laugh for the live studio audience or whatever. But yeah, I don't think that really is part of the canon. But it's funny because we talked about recently in episodes about how the writers and producers are taking things from normal life and adding a magic twist to them, such as learning how to drive and whatever. So this one is another one, too, where a child wants to see a scary movie thinking they're old enough. They see it, they get really freaked out, and then it affects them afterwards. So Alex is freaking out when she sees the killers run them, and even Susan and Zach, who are like, there are just some things that you can't unsee.
Yeah, and they're 17, and they're supposed to be these cool kids, but they're scared, too.
So yeah, I think it's funny how that was another good, kind of magic twist.
Yes, definitely. I love that. One thing that I haven't talked about because it wasn't really relevant to the episode, it was just something funny that came up 2 or 3 times, was that Jerry wants Alex to join the Air Force.
That was hilarious.
What?
I forgot all about that.
I did not remember that at all.
Yeah,
and I was
hilarious.
Like, what on earth? That was so funny. He brought it up at least twice, maybe 3 times.
Yeah, Alex is going to the Air Force, and then she's like, what? It's like, that's just the discipline you need. And I was like, oh my gosh. That kind of gave me a foreshadowing to season 2 as well, because in season 2, the savagery between the Russos is really heightened, where they start throwing a lot of zingers, and they start throwing one another
just
under
roasting
the bus.
each other.
Oh yeah, roasting each other and all that. So that was kind of a sneak peek into that, because right now I think everything's pretty safe so far and pretty tame, but once we get to season 2, the dialogue and those zingers are just boom, boom, boom. Yep. The writing is going to go up a level.
Yes, it gets a lot sharper and a lot funnier, and I think once the show had really been established and the writers knew what they could get away with. They really elevate their game, and I'm very excited to get to that.
Absolutely.
But there also was a lot of good one-liners in this episode as well. So if you want, we can move on to our favorite quotes of the episode.
Absolutely. Should I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So mine, I was getting kind of worried because one of the things about trying to find a quote is like I'm always listening really hard to every single line, trying to find the right quote to be my favorite. And I was getting worried because I really wasn't finding that one quote.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh man, I might have to go back and kind of settle for one or whatever. And no, but then it hit me and it was perfect and I knew it as soon as it happened. So when Jerry, and I think it's actually right after those two guys are talking about Alex being in there, he's like, I've seen it 16 times. All of a sudden, these two characters, Alex and Justin, are in there. They have chemistry together. It looks like they're siblings and grew up together. And that kind of tips Jerry and Teresa off as to like, oh man, I think something's wrong. They could be in the movie. And so Teresa walks up to the ticket taker and says, Miss, 2 tickets for that disaster party bingo Halloween thing. Yeah. I don't know where bingo came from.
Bingo.
I love the bingo Halloween thing. Yeah.
That's so good.
And just that quote, because that's kind of how I felt in the beginning of this episode. I was like, what's the movie called? I can't think of the name. So I can relate to that. It's a long, stupid name, and Teresa gets it really funny with the disaster party bingo Halloween thing. So that's my quote.
Yeah, and her delivery of that line was just gold. I loved that. So I actually had written a few down, so I'm going to give a couple of honorable mentions before I give my actual choice.
Okay.
So one was from Justin at the beginning of the episode when Alex was making fun of him for being the only family member that still takes baths instead of showers. And he said, "You try floating an aircraft carrier in the shower for an experiment."
That was so good.
So that was a good one.
It makes me think of an episode of Drake and Josh where Josh was in the bathtub doing kind of the same thing with like a shark or whatever, and I don't know, it's a funny, iconic scene.
I do remember that.
It's a popular GIF, I think.
Yes, I've seen that.
Of Josh with bubbles. Anyway, go ahead.
My next, I'm sorry that I have so many, but my next honorable mention is from Alex when she's talking to Justin at the theater. And he's, telling her, part of being an adult is this, blah, 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 blah. And her comeback is, well, part of being me is ignoring the rules and doing whatever I want.
That's a perfect Alex quote right there.
It is.
That's so good.
But I think the one that has to take the cake, I don't know why, it just was entertaining to me when she was talking about Ruby Donahue to Susan in the sub shop. And she said, "Have you heard her new CD of sensitive yet mildly angry rock songs?"
I feel like that's like Olivia Rodrigo.
Yes, or like Taylor Swift or something. Like,
yes.
I love that.
I love that too. That's great. Maybe at some point, Tears of Blood and Ruby Donahue will go on tour together at some point, and one will open for the other one. I don't know. Anyway, that's pretty funny. So, yeah, this has been another fun episode breaking down Wizards of Waverly Place, so we're glad everybody's joining us. Leave us your thoughts on this episode, and out of the 9, which is your favorite episode so far? Do you have a favorite quote? Leave us your favorite quote, if so. And then also you can follow us on Instagram. We are at the Wizards Lair Podcast. And then, of course, subscribe on YouTube because we're dropping episodes at least once a month now. We're trying to do it somewhat continuously, but we also have various schedules and, conflicts there. So we try and do it as much as possible, but we're so glad that you guys are watching with us.
Yes, thanks so much for listening. Again, like he said, leave us your comments and your thoughts on this episode and continue watching the show along with us on Disney+. And we will see you next time.
Yep, back for episode 10. We will see you then. Thank you guys so much. Peace out.